Hello, dear friends, and welcome to the Heallist Podcast. If this content resonates, please hit subscribe or follow to support this independent content. Today's guest spent over a decade as a registered dietitian, watching clients follow the right advice and still struggle. Leah Van Dolder is an RD and mindset coach who works with women on the behavioral and psychological patterns underneath their relationship with food, not the food itself. And we are getting into what healing your relationship with food actually means in practice. So, welcome, Leah. So good to have you.
Really, so good to be here and so good to see you again.
Yes, this conversation is so important in this day and age, and we're going to talk a little bit why and all the reasons. I feel like as I age personally, and as I try to balance my life as a mother, as a startup founder, as a person in the world in general, I come back to that idea of like nutrition. It's such a fundamental piece of our lives. And unfortunately, in my case, I didn't learn proper nutrition until I was in my 40s and was forced to do so. But I think what you do is just really important for women and for people in general. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with you.
I'm so excited to dive deep. Nutrition is such a beautiful gateway to talk about so many things. So bring it on. I'm an open book.
Amazing. So I like to dive right in and really, I mean, give me like the biggest thing that you learned. And of course, you've gone through this journey, right? From, clinical nutrition. What was the moment for you that nutrition became kind of the focus and then how that shifted over years?
It never was the focus. And I think that's what was so beautiful about my evolution with it. Went to university and I started in arts because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with myself. I started in arts and I quickly realized that I did not like that. And I shifted into a Bachelor of Science and I was playing around with nutrition classes. But what I was really hooked on was psychology. I loved neuroscience and I love the behavior classes and cognitive behavior. And I was so obsessed with that. And I also became very attuned to how our nutrition made a big difference in terms of how we feel, how we function. And I was really amazed by the connection between nutrition and our relationship with it and how it absolutely affects not just our physique, but our energy, our mental clarity, our focus, our energy. And not just, I know I said energy twice, but energy in terms of that magnetism, right? That confidence that just oozes out of us. I find it so beautiful how it all intertwines. You said something to Yuli, which I thought was really, I'm glad that you said it at the beginning. You said you were kind of forced into learning about nutrition when you were 40. I recognize how powerful a woman's relationship with food is, and especially her leading by example. And I recognize that I gained the beautiful gift of seeing a woman fully embodied in a healthy relationship with herself and her food by my mother. And I realized as I was working because my very first clinical job was in a weight loss clinic. And what I loved about it was the human connection and having these deep, intimate conversations with women around food. Because, like I said, food is this gateway into talking about everything else. And I quickly realized how fortunate I was and how much of a blessing it was to grow up in a home where my mother had a very healthy, nourishing relationship with food. And I realized that the more that I talked to women and how warped their perceptions were around food, how they grew up in a home where their mother was continuously on Weight Watchers, Ideal Protein, talking about the next wedding that she's got to go to and lose 10 pounds to rock her dress, or talking about her body, picking herself apart in the mirror. And I was like, whoa, what a gift it has been to me to have a role model and somebody who passes down those habits to me just naturally. I learned those as a kid, and I see how much of a privilege that was and how powerful it is for women to create a nourishing relationship with food so they can pass it down to their children. because that's generational health. There's such an impact there.
Absolutely. I mean, you are very lucky, and I feel like most of us, especially most women, we did not have that privilege because, like you said, there's so many different stereotypes that are engraved in us from the very early age, and especially some of the older generations. Not to blame anyone, I feel like they didn't have access to the same information we have today, so they did their best. We love them deeply. But there was also a lot of really, really like dangerous stories, right, that we were exposed to. So can you talk about some of those stereotypes or some of those limiting beliefs that women come to you these days?
Yeah. Well, the first one that come to mind is how food, like the good food, bad food, certain foods are put on a pedestal of like, oh, well, I shouldn't have those. I can't have those. That's going to go straight to my hips. We put on these foods on a pedestal. And it's interesting too in psychology. Of course, the things that we can't have or we shouldn't have, of course, we want them more. It's like telling your child, you can't play with that toy, but you can play with all these other 50 toys. The one that they want to play with is the one that they can't have. So that is a fascinating dynamic with food and how we assign importance, or also, yay, me, I have more willpower or discipline because I can resist the chocolate cake that's brought into the staff room, So that dynamic is also very interesting. So the good food, bad food thing, the pedestal, and I think also too around numbers, our body shape and size, and how that subtly works into our self-worth. That also. And, so many women that I work with, they say they recognize, like, I recognize that, I heard things from my mom talk about like getting smaller and skinnier. And, it's a lot of their self worth and capabilities and belief in self are tied into a number. And even though I personally did not experience that myself with weight and numbers, I personally experienced the same feelings when it came to building my business and making more money every month. And that association with my worth and how I felt about myself. So the numbers and the self-worth, that is also a very common thread.
Yeah, no, those are really great points. I'm gonna throw in just something that came up as well as you were talking about good food and bad food. I feel like we also live in such an age of like this extreme marketing, right? That is constantly bombarded. We are bombarded with those messages that are sometimes like manipulative, right? And there's like people that are profiting from that. Every day there's like a new ingredient, like today is protein, and all of a sudden there's protein everywhere, right? Like people put they throw powder into something and all of a sudden it's a healthy food. So for me it's also like that misconception about one is labeling what good or what bad, but then also the misconception of like what is the good stuff are actually good for you, or is it
Yeah.
marketing?
Yes, it's such a good point because I was grocery shopping the other day and it's so funny because you can see a product and just on the branding and what it says, it's gluten free or it's organic or whatever it is, like no sugar added. And I can't even remember what the product was, but looking at the ingredients, and that's a big thing too. It's one thing to read a label, and it's another thing to understand how that food relates to your body or what it's doing within your body. But you're right, the food marketing is such a big thing. And there's so many eye roll moments where I go into the grocery store, I'm like, good God, like no wonder it's an absolute disaster
Yeah.
trying to shop. There's so much, so much. It's confusing.
I mean, I feel like you have to be almost like a food scientist today to differentiate. And it took me, even being in wellness a few years, it took me some time to start learning. And like you said, reading the label is not enough because we don't understand half of the things it says, right? So I started using apps that actually help you like scan food and give you at least some sort of a rating because it's really impossible to navigate, at least if you live in the US, the food industry, it is so corrupted that it's really impossible to make good decisions for yourself unless you're equipped with some sort of like a scientific data or an app that helps you navigate that space. So to your point, I also was shocked to discover using like app like the processed app, for example, how many things that are labeled organic, non-GMO are actually completely ultra processed. That was news to me that it was even possible and legal in this day and age.
Yes, yeah. The app that, the other one that comes to mind is Yuka. Yuka is another really familiar one as well. But yeah, having that rating and making sense of it. And also recognizing too, like I really love living in the lifestyle of, choosing about 90% foods from whole foods and still giving yourself full permission to enjoy, 10% of those foods that might not be as nourishing on the continuum of foods. But I don't know about you, Ely, but I could not live in a world without enjoying chocolate or treats.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The Dutch girl in me would die without sweets of some type.
So we talk about the issue in the market, right? And all the challenges we're facing as consumers of food, as shoppers of food, as women that are aging and their biology is changing, the stereotypes that we came with. So I'm pretty sure most women that come to you, they're in some sort of stage of despair probably. They probably tried things, right? They tried it the all the programs and the weight loss and working maybe with other modalities. They come to you. Describe that moment or maybe give us some examples of clients. When do they reach the stage that okay, I need a coach, I need help?
What I am doing is not working. So accepting and realizing that, not feeling guilty about reaching out and recognizing that they can't do it alone or they don't want to. Because they say, I feel really lonely in this. I don't want to do it on my own. Plus, I don't have the time or the mental bandwidth to figure it out. And there's this low grade annoyance because they start to realize that the cost of staying the same is way more expensive than investing in the solution and getting the right support. That's the moment. I usually ask them, I said, so this might sound like a super weird question, but how much worse does this have to get in order to do something about it? They're like, no, like it cannot get any worse because I don't recognize myself in the mirror. This isn't me. I don't feel like my exterior matches like who I am. And I don't want it to get any worse. I don't want it to.
And what was that moment? What do you see kind of the biggest mind shift that happens? And I know it's not as easy or as simple, but you are talking about the mindset being one of the key components of that journey. So talk through that. What happens when after those women realize it cannot get any worse? Where do we go from there?
Yeah, recognizing that it's less about food. Realizing that it's less about food and it's more about organization and implementation and repetition of this stuff. And incorporating balance into their everyday life because I think one of the most amazing things that I see, well, a couple things are coming to mind. The one is recognizing they're like, I didn't realize that it could be this simple. Where when women come into my world, I get a really good idea. I've got a three-step proven process for this where we reveal what's not working. We reveal the habits, the thought processes, the stories, the mindsets that are keeping them stuck. We refine all of it and then we recalibrate her to a new level so that she elevates her baseline. She elevates her default habits. And one of the things too is recognizing women are like, why have I been making this so much harder than it needs to be? Here I am trying to change everything at once or do a plan that is so different than what I'm used to. And where our brain comes into that in our mind is like, our brain doesn't love that much change at one time. Like, we can all follow a meal plan for like 3 days, but come Thursday night, you are mentally tapped. Life is lifing. And you're like, screw this. I'm just going for the easy, like, let's press the easy button. I'm going to go for what's quick and convenient and what's most familiar. So, this beautiful shift from I don't have to try so flippin' hard and white knuckle it through this journey. I can start with 3 things, and oftentimes for women, it's making a decision ahead of time. And I'm like, less choice equals more freedom in your brain. Less decisions in the moment when you are stressed, tired, and mentally tapped, the better when it comes to nutrition. So, making those decisions ahead of time and prepping. Healthy eating doesn't happen by accident, it happens on purpose. And the planning ahead so that women have those moments during the week where they're like, oh, I am just loving on my past self right now. So the element of really realizing that it's not about the information. Like I had a couple of women say, they're like, I know this is not an education problem, but I suck at the execution. I suck at the implementation of it and the consistency. So organizing, planning, having a plan in place and prepping simple things so that there's more freedom and headspace. And also recognizing too that shifting also the definition of consistency. Because oftentimes, usually women say, I suck at consistent execution. I say, tell me what consistency means to you. And we live in this social world where women have just thought that consistency is synonymous with perfection, where they think, well, consistency is I get to the gym 5 times a week, I eat what I should, I don't mess up, and, heaven forbid I have a donut because then my whole day's a write off. So, consistency is not synonymous with perfection. They're very different. So, I know I shared a lot there, but I think the most amazing thing to me is seeing women's brains light up of like, oh my gosh, I've been going at this the wrong way. This can actually be so much easier than I thought. This can actually be fun and feel light and energizing versus a total slog. And actually enjoying food. So that's a big shift. And getting away from tracking macros, like you're going to confession of like, oh, forgive me, Father, I have sinned. I ate 3 crackers and didn't track them today, like whatever it was. So it's creating more enjoyment with food in the process of becoming the healthy, happy, and really like the strongest version of you.
Amazing. So you mentioned something about enjoyment that really struck with me because I feel like it's another thing that that is installed in our brains sometimes, that there's certain foods that are meant to enjoy, right? Like the ice creams and the chocolate cakes, right? And then there's certain foods that we have to like suffer through. Like the greens, we just gotta do it because of their and
We're
and
good for me.
right? And I think it's one of the things like I'm trying to do consciously as I'm learning to be more of a mindful eater, to really find joy in eating kale, which is not my first choice by default. But it's like, making like for me, I'm a visual person. So part of it is making like a visually beautiful, colorful dish. And then working with myself to see can I actually really truly enjoy this bite of kale, even though it doesn't have those, the taste that we're like brainwashed to think that is enjoyable.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up, really, because I'm thinking about a client said to me, she's like, I used to think, and again, the thought, the belief, I used to think that I had to suffer through eating fruits and vegetables just because they're good for me. It felt forced. And she said, and then the opposite too around, the things like French fries or chips or cakes, whatever. She said, I used to really love those because I'm like, oh, they taste so good and they're just so yummy. So when hearing her own thought process and her own belief around food, I'm like, okay, now we get to create a new confirmation bias in your brain that sounds like, hey, kale can be enjoyable. We just get to play and flirt around with what you add to it, how you cook it, whatever it may be. Uh that's so fun. That's the fun part about this is allowing yourself to play in the kitchen because I think too we get so we're like I don't know what to do. I'm going to do the recipe wrong. Usually, I never cook with a recipe. I never do. I'm just like, sure, let's try this and see how it turns out. And yeah, so I'm curious, how have you made kale enjoyable?
Well, I think one thing as I said is like making it actually visually appealing and making it like when I make myself lunch sometimes, and I often have like just a few minutes, but just like throwing things in it, make it colorful, putting on a beautiful plate that looks like a restaurant almost, right? So I serve myself this dish and I make it like look very decadent, right? So for me, it's like, okay, I get the visual pleasure out of it and the setting itself, that's what creates that
Yeah,
pleasure and joy.
experience.
Exactly. Yes.
Experience. Yeah, I'm similar. I really love an array of colors, so I love doing and also ease. Like anytime I can press the easy button on something, I'm on it. So I love utilizing those like the cut slaws or the pre-washed whatever, the spinach or the bag salad mixes and adding little pieces of color or different textures, right? Like great carrot on top or some zucchini or put some roasted lentils or chickpeas on top. Of course, store bought. Like I'm not making those. Like maybe on a Sunday, but yeah, it's that element of visual appeal and just allowing yourself to try. Like I'm thinking about an example to one of the women in my program. She said, "I just decided to play around with a burger." And she said the old me just thought, well, a burger is made with a big white Kaiser bun, loads of mayo and ketchup on there, and piled high with whatever pickles and cheese and stuff. And she said, I started questioning that. Where did the idea of the ultimate burger come from that, like, it has to look like this? So the fun in it is just questioning the story, questioning like, how did this even come to be? So she's like, "You would be so proud of me." She's like, "I was just playing around, playing around." She's like, I just decided to go no bun, not because of, oh, I can't have carbs, but because I'm just going to try this and see how I like it." And she said, I put some Dijon mustard because she loves mustards. And she's like, I'm obsessed with all these different kinds. So she said, I did a plate of greens on my dinner plate. I've got my burger patty, had these amazing mustards, put some cheese on top and these pickles. And she's like, it was the best thing ever. And then she instead of the mayo, she did a little bit of mayo with plain Greek yogurt, mixed a little bit of hot sauce in there. She's like, "It was so delicious." And I recognized that I felt so satisfied and I felt so much better after that meal because I wasn't weighed down by it. And I felt like I had choice. Like I had a say in the matter in terms of what I put on my plate because I allowed myself to play and see how it turned out.
I love that. And I think again, like that choice is so important. Like we talked about how certain things just kind of like certain stories that came down the line, we believe in them and we kind of live by them. Like I had a funny story when at some point in my life, I was wise enough to get a personal trainer for a while. And the first thing he asked me, and I was shocked, like he started talking about nutrition. What do I eat for lunch? And I was like, I don't know, a sandwich. And he looked at me and he said, like, why are you a truck driver? It's like truck
Like, yes,
drivers needed a convenient way to pack food for the road.
yeah,
So they load it with in a bread, and so it's easy to like handheld and eat. And that really made me pause. And I just said, how those little things I feel like stay with you for life, right? That one question, and it was like funny, and I was a little offended, right? But it really stuck with me. I'm like, wait a second, do I need all this bread? And then you go on a story to like unpack, like, why do I eat so much bread? And then it goes back to my childhood that this was like my comfort zone, right? And but it's really interesting how some of those stories, like by default, we just kind of accept them instead of questioning it. It's like, okay, why do I need this loaf of bread just to eat lunch? So I can totally relate to that.
it's true. It's so true. And that is the basis of any transformation. It's really It's looking at it and choosing a curious lens of where did this come from? And it also, for me personally, when I started taking that approach versus the critical lens of like, oh my gosh, like, why are you eating this? Do better, do better next time. Okay. It's looking at the curiosity because I personally felt it was so much more empowering that way. And that element of choice, because women say all the time, they're like, I just want to feel in control around food. And the sense of feeling in control comes from this place of truly knowing that you have choice and feeling good about the choice that you made and taking responsibility for that choice versus, say, going into, I don't know, like a typical diet plan where women are looking to lose weight and they're put on something that they didn't choose or feeling like they have to like follow a plan or they're like adhering to something deep down, it's not creating more trust in our choices. Deep down, usually what I hear, it's like, oh God, when is this 30-day thing going to be over so I can eat what I want to? So questioning the stories and just being like, where are these? Since when did I like breakfast? I was thinking about this too. Like you say, lunch and your truck driver lunch. I was thinking about weekend breakfast traditions. One of the women, my client, she's like, I just have this tradition of making pancakes in bacon grease. She starts with bacon in the pan and then does the pancakes in the bacon grease. And she's like, "Where did that even come from?" She's like, "This is hilarious." So it's like, great. Let's unpack that. And it usually like the breadcrumb trail to childhood stories, memories, all of that. And it's just I think it's just the coolest thing.
Well, you are in I feel like in the hardest business, which a lot of holistic practitioners are, and it's a business of changing habits
Yeah.
or helping people change habits. And I admire people that step on this path, but I know it's not the easiest path. What do you see in terms of um, changing habits that actually like clicks with people? Like what are some of the techniques or some of the mindset strategies that we haven't mentioned yet, perhaps that really do the work?
Yeah, what's coming to mind first, Yuli, is learning how to become responsive versus reactive in a situation. That's huge. That's huge. And I talk a lot about identity shifting and, for lasting transformation, you're changing your being in these moments. You're changing how you behave in these moments. You know, when lifes, when you're triggered, when you're tired, when you're stressed, who's the version of you who shows up in those circumstances? The default or the reactive version of you who, defaults to food, defaults to ice cream and sits on the couch with this story of like, I deserved it, I pushed through, good for me, self-soothing, or the version of you who takes a moment to think, because the difference between a reaction and a response is the pause. Being able to just like, hold on a second here. Why am I walking to the freezer? Why is the pantry calling my name? What is my body actually asking of me? How am I what type of emotion am I trying to fulfill with food? So it's that pathway of self-awareness, self-discovery, honoring body in the moment and recognizing that, wow, sure, food could fill an emotional comfort, absolutely. And so could getting outside for some fresh air when I'm feeling stressed, or having a hot bath and lighting a candle because I am genuinely exhausted from working 10 extra hours this week. So it's a really beautiful way to become your own scientist and your own observer of your patterns and understanding the thought processes that lead to that behavior or your emotional state that lead to a behavior, and recognizing that you can, in a moment, take a pause and take a different pathway. And with repeating that time and time again, the neuroplasticity, you're creating this new pathway in your brain. And what that does is gets you to this place where automatically, instead of, like, this example is coming to mind, but one of my clients, she's like, I used to think that exercise was just something to do and I was feeling happy and motivated. She's like, now I've learned. She's like, Instead of when I'm stressed, instead of my default to eat," she's like, "I have rewired and recognized that when I am fired up and aggravated," she's like, "that is prime time to move." So now her autopilot is to get out and move versus eat. Because oftentimes the food is just avoidance. We just want to temporarily soothe. We're just given a band-aid solution versus actually giving ourselves the space and the courage to really feel the discomfort of our feels. So it is the most uncomfortable, fulfilling, wild, like transformative journey. I love the work that I do, as you can tell, because women just come alive. They're like, oh my gosh, I just didn't realize that I could feel this great in my body and see that these skills of becoming responsive versus reactive and really becoming mindful and thoughtful about our next choice. That is a transferable skill that helps in so many different areas of their life, in their communication with their partners, at work, how they show up. And when women start to see the benefit of that, they see that the behavior change leads to more presence, more kindness, more compassion. It makes the growing pains and the stretch marks of growth so worth it.
I love that. And you described so well like a process. I've been trying to live, and obviously it's easier said than done, right? To develop that level of self control, that observer effect, where you're actually not allowing like the monkey brain to lead you to places that you didn't want to go, right? But somehow here we are. And I think also, I know you work with a lot of high achieving perfectionist type A women that I proudly belong to. Can you just touch upon any specific things that you see in this particular group of women? Because I feel like, it's like the trouble of the functioning, that executive functioning brain that you know everything, you know what to do, you're capable, right? Why do we fail in some of those areas?
Yeah, a couple things that come to mind. Well, the first one is shame hides in the dark. And I really love just helping women take the shame of that, just like uplifting from it and recognizing that it's not your fault. It's not your fault. The other thing too is the drive and those characteristics of high achieving A-type personalities, they work and they've served you very well with getting you to places within your career, achieving milestones. Like, they've served you in a beautiful capacity. However, when it comes to your body does not respond well to, like, push, 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 white knuckling, like hustle harder. So, what's really beautiful about the body transformation is really helping women soften and come into that feminine energy as well. Cause hey, I love me, my good masculine energy, hustle, hustle. I love it. We all love a good execution. And also recognizing too that we cannot rush our body. We cannot rush it because it knows. And when we start slapping time frames on things, because we all love that, we have time frames, and then we also make it mean something of, if I don't achieve 5-pound weight loss in 14 days, well, then somehow I'm a failure. So I really love bringing awareness to what kind of timelines are you setting on yourself, Can you modify them? And what's the interpretation of things? Just because you don't lose a pound this week doesn't mean you're off course or failing. What's the interpretation of that? What are you making these moments mean about you as a person? So, if I were sum this all up, it's shifting the expectations of self and of
Yeah.
body and learning how to slow down, listen, and honor and surrender the outcome and the timeline and fall in love with the process of becoming the healthiest, happiest, most confident version of yourself.
Amazing. I love it. Pretty much the opposite of what we should be doing in business, right? Like no KPIs, no timelines,
It
surrender to the
is.
process.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so
Yes.
uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. So, yes, it's the total opposite. And yeah, it's a total bamboozle to your brain and emotions. Yes. Yeah.
I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that. And I feel like we can have a conversation in this day and age about nutrition and potential weight loss, right? We're not labeling things without mentioning all the incredible scientific advances of our times. And part of it is the shortcuts, right? The amazing menu of shortcuts that are available for people these days. And I think as science progresses, the need for discernment also grows. That's how I feel personally, being in this very crowded wellness space that is continues to grow and in a pace that sometimes outweighs the proof or the evidence, right? We're rushing to accept a lot of those new shortcuts that sometimes give us those KPIs in a very short timeline that satisfy a lot of people. And the reality of today is, I think we just looked at the stats before this conversation that 15% of women in the US are on some sort of GLP-1 medication, and 22% tried it in their lifetime. And I think as the age group goes higher, above 50, I believe it's about 1 in 5 women actually is on GLP-1. And we are seeing, and I have friends who've taken them, and I see people transform and finally feeling like themselves and having their dream bodies and how their life is shifting. But part of me is also the holistic part of me that appreciates nutrition and learning and changing habits and developing that observer effect and the self control. I can't help but wonder, what are some of the long-term behavioral or psychological impacts of those shortcuts that we might be considering? And I think from you coming from a place of nutrition and psychology and mindsets, I'm just really curious about your perspective. And I'm sure you've had clients that came to you either in that process or before or after. What are you seeing in your space?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm seeing that medications, there's a time and a place. And there's some women that it's a great fit for and some that it's not. And again, going back to choice and discernment, I love that word. At the end of the day, it's your choice, your body, and feeling that something is a good fit for you. That absolutely takes discernment. Now, with working in weight loss clinics for over a decade, absolutely, there was many, many women that were taking GLP-1s and using these medications. And the one thing that I'll say about this is what happens when you take them away? When you are choosing a medication or whatever else, like whether it's a detox or another shortcut, when it's done or when you decide to stop, then what happens? So I really like the thought process and any conversation with women. It's like, again, it's your body and it's your choice. And recognizing that any of these modalities, it could be a great adjunct to what you're doing. The behavior, the psychology, and the behavior change that has to be included in the program in order to get the lasting change. So what I see often is women take GLP and thinking like, okay, what mindset is this is going to give me fast and furious results. Great, cool. And it happens, but then they come off of it. Well, you've just taken away this hormone. So it makes a lot of sense that appetite's going to come back, weight's going to come back. If you haven't also looked at the behavior change, your relationship with food, everything that we've talked about here. So I have also seen women that are doing the deep transformative behavior change using a GLP-1 or medication to support them in their journey. I've seen it done that way too. Yeah, it really comes back to that element of choice, practicing discernment and recognizing that, okay, how do I want this to end? Do I want lasting results, or am I cool to just go fast and furious, have temporary results? Or do I want lasting results and also be accepting and okay with the fact that it's going to take me longer to get there? So it's like, what do you want? Fast and temporary, or steady, sustainable, and lasting?
It's a very important point. Well, thank you for sharing that. And it ended up being a long episode because I feel like I could talk for hours about nutrition and psychology. This is really my cup of tea, and you're a great guest to have this conversation with. Anything that we should leave our listeners with, if there's one take or maybe something we haven't mentioned yet that you would like to share?
Yeah, this is coming through. There's nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look better. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel your absolute best. There's so many women that come to me and they're like, "Oh, I know this sounds so shallow of me, but like I want to look better." I'm like, "Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad about it. Celebrate the fact that you want that for yourself." And not from like, who cares if there's an element of vanity in it? We're all vain. We all love looking good, but it's also the energy that you're coming into this is when you see a woman that takes care of yourself, like the signal that you send out, it's like the signal is I matter and I take myself seriously. So do not feel bad about wanting more for yourself.
I love that message. Well, thank you for leaving us with this beautiful thought. And I can't thank you enough for sharing all your wisdom. Thank you so much for being here with us.
You're welcome, Neely.